Welcome to Swords and Hammers, where truth comes clothed in tales, and the soul remembers what the mind forgets. The world is loud, but for these few minutes, it can wait. Settle in, and listen well. The Man Who Wanted Nothing. A tale of getting what you asked for. There was a man named Cooper Croop who lived in the town of Bellwether's Crossing, and everyone agreed he was the most reasonable fellow they had ever despised. He was not wicked in any interesting way. He had never stolen a horse, or kissed another man's wife, or burned down a barn for the sheer orange joy of it. He simply wanted to be left alone. This is a common enough desire, but Cooper Croop had refined it into something approaching philosophy. He wanted nothing from anyone, and he wanted to owe nothing in return. He paid his debts the very hour they came due, not from honor, but from hatred of obligation. He accepted no favors, offered no help, attended no festivals, and when his mother lay dying in the back room, he hired a woman to sit with her, so he would not have to endure the awkwardness of her gratitude. The townspeople found this disturbing, which is saying something, because the people of Bellwether's Crossing had seen all manner of sinners come through, and most of them were at least entertaining. There was old Phineas Gull, who had counterfeited coins until his fingers turned green from the chemicals, and who now wandered the streets singing hymns to compensate. There was the widow Brennick, who had poisoned her husband with foxglove, and wept about it every Sunday with such theatrical vigor that the congregation had come to look forward to her performances. There was even young Crispin Farrow, who claimed to have seen a vision of the Almighty, but who also claimed the Almighty owed him 12 silver pieces for his faithful service. These were proper sinners. They had texture. Cooper Croop had no texture at all. He was smooth as a stone, polished by indifference. When the traveling preacher came through that autumn, he set up his tent in the field behind the blacksmith shop and began to speak of fire. Not ordinary fire, mind you. The preacher spoke of flame that was patient, flame that did not hurry, flame that would burn without consuming because it had forever to do its work. He spoke of a worm that did not die, and the crowd shuddered pleasantly, the way people do when hearing terrible news about strangers. Cooper Croop stood at the back of the crowd and listened without expression. When the preacher called for sinners to come forward and confess their chains, people moved. Phineas Gull shuffled up, weeping about his green-fingered counterfeiting. The widow Brennick collapsed in fresh theatrical sobs. Even young Crispin Farrow admitted that perhaps the Almighty did not actually owe him money, but Cooper Croop remained where he stood. Afterward, the preacher found him still there, arms folded, watching the tent come down. "Tell me," the preacher said, "what is it that you, sir, want?" "Nothing," said Cooper Croop. The preacher laughed, which was not the response Croop expected. "That is what everyone says who is lying to themselves," the preacher replied. "They say nothing because they cannot bear to name the everything they actually crave." Croop shook his head. "You misunderstand me," he said. "I mean it precisely. I want nothing at all. No heaven, no harps, no reunion with dead relatives I barely tolerated when they were alive. I want no eternal singing because I cannot carry a tune. I want no feasting because I have a weak stomach. I want no God because I refuse to be grateful." He said this last part with the conviction of a man who had given the matter considerable thought. The preacher went quiet, which was unnerving because preachers are not often quiet. "You might be interested to know," he said slowly. "Hell is not what most people imagine." "I imagine nothing," Croop replied. "Exactly," said the preacher. Hell is not fire imposed from without by a vengeful deity. Hell is the final, perfect granting of the wish you just made. Hell is getting nothing, forever. It is the soul curled inward upon itself like a fist that will not open. It is independence so complete that you will never again feel another's warmth. You will want nothing, and nothing is what you shall have, and you will discover, too late, that nothing is not peace. Nothing is the absence of everything that makes existence bearable. Croop smiled thinly. You are trying to frighten me with fairy tales. The preacher shook his head. I am telling you what fire actually means. The fire is real, but its fuel is you. It burns because the soul made in the image of God cannot stop existing. You cannot unmake yourself, sir. You can only twist yourself into shapes that ache forever. The worm that does not die is memory. You will remember every act of grace you refused, every hand extended that you slapped away, every moment you could have stepped into the light but chose your own magnificent isolation. Croop turned and walked home. He was not troubled. He had arranged his life like a locked room, and locked rooms were his specialty. The years passed. Cooper Croop grew older in the way stones grow older, which is to say without changing at all. He watched the townspeople marry and bury their dead and weep and laugh and need each other, and he congratulated himself on escaping such messiness. When his neighbor's barn burned down, they came to him for help. He declined politely. When a child fell through the ice on the winter pond, he watched from his window. Someone else pulled her out. When the great sickness came through Bellwether's crossing and bodies stacked like cordwood at the edge of town, he locked his door and ate his stored provisions, and emerged weeks later, untouched, into a world newly full of widows and orphans he had no intention of helping. He had built his fortress. No debt, no obligation, no need of anyone, no need for God. It was perfect. And then one morning he woke up and didn't wake up, and a door opened that had no handle on his side. What happened next, I cannot tell you precisely. No one can. But the teachers of theology say something important, and because they are boring, people often miss it. They say that God does not send people to hell. He simply grants them the autonomy they demanded. They say that every soul in that dark place chose to be there, chose it over and over, chose self over surrender until the choosing calcified into permanent condition. They say that the damned will acknowledge the justice of their sentence, even while raging against it. They will see clearly, perhaps for the first time, exactly what they rejected. Cooper Croop had spent his whole life saying, "Leave me alone." And now, at last, something was listening. The fire, if fire it was, burned differently than he expected. It did not attack from outside like a torturer's brand. It rose from within, from the hollow place where love should have lived, from the emptiness he had cultivated so carefully. He had wanted nothing. Now nothing was all he had. He had refused all debts. Now no one owed him anything. He had rejected every hand. Now no hand could reach him. He had made himself an island, and the sea around him was forever. And the terrible thing, the truly terrible thing, was that he still did not want to change. He saw his error with absolute clarity, and hated it not because it was wrong, but because it had brought him here. He would have done it all again if only he could have escaped the consequences. That is the difference, the preachers say, between remorse and repentance. Remorse is the sorrow of a thief caught stealing. Repentance is the sorrow that the stealing was done at all. Hell is full of remorse. Repentance alone could open the door, but the hands that might reach for it have forgotten how to open. Now, you may ask why I am telling you this story about a man nobody liked. And the answer is simpler than you wish. The answer is that everyone knows a Cooper Croop. Perhaps you work beside one or grew up with one, or perhaps you see one in the mirror when the light is unflattering. The soul that says, "I want nothing," is the most dangerous soul of all, because it believes itself safe. It believes that wanting nothing is wanting peace. It believes that needing no one is strength. It believes that refusing the gift costs nothing because it asked for nothing. But the gift was offered anyway. It was offered at infinite cost by a God who crossed the chasm from his side because we could never cross from ours. Those who trample that gift underfoot, the gift of Jesus Christ, counting his shed blood as common, face a judgment proportionate not to human scales, but to the worth of what was rejected. And what was rejected was everything. There is a door, the preachers say. There has always been a door. The handle is on your side, but you have to want something to turn it. You have to want mercy, which means admitting you need it. You have to want the feast, even if you think yourself unworthy of the table. You have to want the music, even if you cannot carry a tune. You have to want God, which means surrendering the magnificent fortress of your independence. Many will not. They will keep their fists clenched forever. And forever, it turns out, is a very long time to be alone with only yourself for company. Cooper Croop got exactly what he asked for. May you, listener, ask for something better. May you, listener, call for someone better. His name is Jesus Christ. Selah.